Hello everyone and welcome to So Aldo DIY. In today's episode, I am going to show you how to create a skirt suit. For this project, you will need 2 1/2 yards of fabric. For the sewing patterns, I actually self-drafted it using my Bodice blocks. If you want a full tutorial on how I made that, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. You will also need the same amount of fabric for the lining. Here I already cut out the pieces for the skirt panel, so I have 2 panels for the back and 1 panel for the front. I also cut out the facing and the lining. The next step is fuse the interfacing to the facing. Then I am going to stitch this on the lining right at the waistline, as you can see here. I simply use my serger to attach those. Then I will do the same thing for the rest of the pieces. Then I am going to match the side seams and stitch it down. I repeated the same thing for the lining. I match it at the right sides and stitch at the side seams. So the skirt is pretty straightforward. I gave it a good press and I also stitched this twill tape right along the side seam because it is draping, it is dragging because the side seam is on a bias. And then I'm just going to fix the hemlines later on once I completed the skirt. Now it's time to attach the zipper. I place the zipper tape just like this, and I'm using about 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to mark how long I want the zipper to be. Then I'm just going to stitch it down. Then I will trim off the excess zipper later on. I will be using an invisible zipper foot. Yeah, if you don't have it, I think it is a good investment. I use it a lot since I use invisible zipper in a lot of my projects. Now it's time to close the back seam. First, I'm going to match it just like this and stitch right here. I trim off the excess zipper. Now it's time to attach the lining. I just match it up at the waistline. Right sides of the fabrics are facing. Be sure that the seams are open when you do this. Then I'm just going to stitch across. I trim off the corners and I also trim the seam allowances just so to remove the excess bulkiness, especially at the corners. Also trim off half of the seam allowance at the waistline just because the lining is not sitting properly. So I had to trim that off and I gave it a good press. Also understitch it just so the lining will stay inside the skirt. Then I am simply just going to match this edge to encase the zipper, and I'm going to stitch across here, and then I'm going to close the back seam. And here it is, it's almost complete, but I am going to let it drape, hem it the next day. This is why it is very important to let it drape overnight, because the side seam is on a bias, therefore it is going to stretch out. I'm not quite sure what type of fabric this is, but this reminds me of a tweed fabric or a Chanel. So I'm not quite sure, so I'm not very helpful when it comes to that, because even though I've been sewing for a long time, fabric composition is I'm still not good at it. I pretty much buy fabrics because I like it. But I will tell you that this fabric frays a lot. So after I hemmed it, this is what it looks like. As you can see, it looks so nice. Now I will be working on the collar. I made the first sample earlier, but it didn't turn out because it was very stiff, and yeah, I just didn't like the way it looks. So I cut out a new piece and I fused it with a cotton fabric. It's the same fabric I use for the lining of the skirt. Then I stitch it on the side seams and on the top edge. Then I trim off the corners so it will get rid of the bulkiness when I turn it out. Now it's time to fuse the iron-on interfacing on the placket. So I place it inside or on the wrong side of the fabric. After I fuse it together, it should look something like this. It looks super nice and crisp on the edges. I also close the darts. Then I trim off the excess interfacing. And here I was struggling on how I would attach the lining to the placket. So I was just like moving it around, and finally I decided I'm just going to stitch it on the bodice just because I haven't figured that out yet. I don't know how to attach a proper lining to a blazer, and this is my option for now. So I'm just going to stitch it all the way around so I can treat the fabric as one, and plus it will help with the fabric too. As I mentioned earlier, the shell fabric frays a lot and I was kind of running out of material. So this is my option or best option for this project. So after I stitch it all the way around, I trim off the excess lining. I repeated the same thing for the front pieces. I haven't mentioned it yet. This is actually my very first suit project or skirt suit project. That's why I was taking my time, and I just want to be extra careful because I actually didn't buy enough material for this, and this was for a client. So I have to make sure that it will work because I'm toast if it didn't. So after I stitch the bodices together, it's time to stitch the collar. So I match the right sides of the collars just like this to the neckline. Yeah, it's kind of a little difficult to explain it just because this is also my first time to work on anything with colors like this. So this project really pushed the boundary for me, but I learned a lot. And I am super excited about it because now I am not afraid to tackle if I have to make another color project. When I stitch the collar and plackets together, there is this pointy edge that's hanging by about 2 inches or 1 inch. And then that is the reason why, so I can tuck in the ends inside of the collar so it's gonna be nice and clean finish. And I was clipping earlier just the corners of the collars or like the inside, the seams, just so I can neatly tuck it in. This part right here is very satisfying to watch for me just because I was very nervous when I was sewing this part right here, just because I don't know if it's going to work. But looking at it now, I didn't have to worry about that. Like, I got it. And then I'm going to stitch it right across. I didn't add lining to the sleeves just because I thought I don't need it. So I matched the right sides of the fabrics. I also added the same twill strip or trim along the edge so it doesn't stretch out the fabric. It's also going to hold the fabric together because it was separating. If I can redo this again, I'm also going to add that twill material along the shoulders just because it stretched out a lot when I was setting in the sleeve in the armhole. I ended up redoing it because it became like a puff sleeves, which I wasn't going for that style. So after I did this, I unpick it and fix that puffiness to get rid of that wrinkling on the shoulders. So after I stitch it in the round, it looks like this. There's a lot of wrinkling at the shoulders and I did not like the look. I also stitched this twill tape along the sleeve hems because it is separating or fraying a lot. It stopped the sleeves from fraying, and this is when I actually unpick the sleeves and fix it. Finish this part, I match the right sides of the fabric and then I fold in the seam allowance and stitch across here. And stitch all the way around. And if you notice, I fixed the shoulders or the sleeves. It looks so much better than before. I also added buttons. I skipped that part because it was a different story. If I didn't mention earlier, I hand stitch all the hemlines just so it will give me that professional look and clean finish. And this is what the final skirt suit looked like. I absolutely love how it turned out. Oh my gosh, it's so perfect. Thanks so much for watching and I hope you are inspired. If you find this tutorial helpful, please don't forget to share this video and leave a comment down below if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching again and I will see you in the next one. Bye!